Question for you. When do you leave middle age and enter old age? Hello, my wandering and pondering friends, Bill here. So today I want to talk about a topic that's related to retirement but not exclusive to it. And speaking of retirement, I realized that I owe some of you an apology. I've been talking about retirement as if we're all on the same path, and that's not true. Some of you are in countries or industries where there's a mandatory retirement age. And some of you chose retirement out of a need or a desire to take care of a loved one. And so we're on different paths, and I'm going to try to be more sensitive to that, and I think we can do that today as well. Act your age. Did you ever hear that phrase growing up? Well, I did. And now decades later, I'm hearing it again. This time in the form of, well, Bill, at your age, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, Z. Well, I'm not going to stop doing something just because I hit some arbitrary date. That seems silly. In fact, this idea that as we age, we can't do things implies that we become less useful. And that's just outright ageism, and it's not right. Let me give you a counter example. So I was doing some volunteer work, clearing some land to expand a parking lot at the IBM Glen, and talking to one of the other volunteers there about a third volunteer. We'll call this third volunteer Jerry. Now, Jerry's a machine when he's working. He takes breaks, but not a lot. And he just keeps going. The other thing is, Jerry has over 2 decades on me. So I asked my peer, I said, how does Jerry keep going at that age? And his response was, well, Jerry didn't stop when he was our age. And so while I can't do everything I could physically at age 25, I'm going to do what I can do. Dan Sullivan is the founder of a strategic consulting firm. And he wrote a book, a short one called My Plan to Live to 156. Yeah, 156 years. That being that he wants to live through a full calendar century, the year 2000 to 2100. And at first that sounds kind of ridiculous, but the more I read, the more interesting it was. Basically his idea is that you live as long as you think you're going to live. Now, we're not elves in Lord of the Rings. We can't live that long. But one of the key phrases in the book, or lines, was, death has been around a long time, and it's very good at what it does. It doesn't need any help from me, and it's not going to get it. Now, we also want to balance the idea that we talked about a few videos ago, the finitude of our lives. And so we're not ignoring that. We're just kind of being optimistic about how much finite time we have. Now, I did find Sullivan's book to be a little lacking in evidence and concrete examples, but as I researched it, I found some other stuff. And in particular, this really cool study from the UK. In 2001, a paper was published by Hannah Cooper and Sir Michael Marmot. This is a multi-phase study, spanned 15 years. And they started out by asking a set of people, at what age do you leave middle age and enter old age? And the results were interesting. Some things that we would expect. Right? First off, people chose typically increments of 5 years. So it was 55, 60, 65, 70, etc. Women tended to be more optimistic and picked higher ages. And also people in higher economic status chose greater ages for entering old age. But what I found particularly interesting was when they adjusted the results based on those skewings of sex and economic status, they found that people that felt middle age began earlier were at higher risk for coronary disease and physical and mental health problems earlier on in their older age. And so that was pretty interesting to me. Now, they talked about it really being more of a predictor than a cause, but still, I think that says something about our mindset. I looked at other studies from Johns Hopkins and other well-known medical institutions. I found a great article from the Mayo Clinic that talked about the aging process and broke it down into effects in 10 different areas. Things like your cardiovascular, your digestive, muscle, joints, and bones, ears and eyes, weight, sexuality, all these different categories. And they also talked about that for all but 3 of them, regular physical activity helps slow the process down or minimize the negative effects of it. So I think that again says something about we should keep doing things as long as we can. I'm not saying we can ignore the aging process. That Mayo Clinic article talks a lot about the different aspects of that. Also, when we say use it or lose it in terms of physical capability, as we get older, it becomes more difficult to find it again, right? To recover or get back to a level of physical activity is more difficult as we age. So consistent physical activity is important at any age. It becomes even more important as we age. So my strategy is more about listening to my body and my mind rather than the calendar. And that does require me to be honest about what I'm hearing. Am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored? Is that an ache that I need to be concerned about? Or am I just a little tired and need to stretch a little bit more? And as we age, we probably do need to pay more attention to warming up and stretching. Also, we're not talking about listening to our body when it says or urging us on to follow unhealthy addictions. Right? In those cases, we want to get professional help. And we want to be aware of our limits and when we exceed them, especially in cases where the risk is greater. So with that in mind, I still allow myself to climb trees. I still allow myself to use a chainsaw. I'm just not allowed to climb a tree with a chainsaw. If we really want to have a risk-free life, we would wrap ourselves in bubble wrap and stay at home and not do anything, which I don't know that that's much of a life and not something I'm going to do. So I'm going to keep doing things, but try to pay attention to what the risk is. So I mentioned earlier that I was volunteering in a project to expand a parking lot. And, we took down a lot of trees, a few dozen, limbed them up and cut the logs to about 6 feet in length. And while moving those logs, I was being super careful about my back, right? Lifting with legs, all that kind of stuff. When I go to lift one up onto my shoulder, and all of a sudden I feel my arm go, my left arm. And so what had happened was apparently a very minor tear in the tendon that connects the bicep to the elbow. Now, that drew, as I told people about it, a lot of act your age rage. People telling me that I shouldn't have been doing that and blah, 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 work harder, not smarter, or work smarter, not harder. And I found that interesting, especially since I had a very similar injury years ago when I was younger. So it really wasn't about my age, it was about biting off more than I could chew. So I'm recuperating, still not at 100%, but I'm getting there. And no surgery required, so that's a good thing. As I'm researching this topic, I'm finding a lot of things about guidelines people want to set up in terms of what you have to do at different ages. In fact, one of them was, at age 50, you need to stop drinking milk. Like there's something magical about turning 50 and milk. And they didn't really give any backing to it. They just said, yep, stop drinking milk at age 50. So if you're wondering where I am today, I'm at Jones Park in the town of Vestal. It's a great park here, good variety of trails. I feel like I can take a different route each time. Now, some of the Vestal parks don't permit dogs. Jones Park happens to be one that does allow them, just have them on a leash. So also coming from the town of Vestal is the tree in Rockefeller Center this year. So it grew up here in Vestal, not in Jones Park, but in somebody's lawn. So check that out when you see it on TV. So I know this isn't easy, trying to figure out when to do things and when to stop doing things. One of the voices we're going to hear from is pride. People would tell me to get a snowblower and stop shoveling by hand. And I said, no, snowblowers are for old people. Well, I finally broke down and got one. Right? I swallowed my pride on that one. And I do know that there's going to come a time where I shouldn't be on the roof or climbing trees, or even at some point where I shouldn't be driving or living alone. But my strategy for that is to, again, listen to my body. And I've been working on a set of tests for myself. Not things that involve my age, but stuff like how's my balance? How are my reflexes? Can I get up off the floor without using my hands? Things like that will measure whether I can keep doing stuff. I know it was tough talking to my siblings about how and when do we tell Dad that he shouldn't be driving. And so as part of that, I've been working on these tests for myself. So I'm really curious, those of you out there, what's your plan for all of this? Actually, what's your thoughts on this whole idea about acting your age? I'd love to hear that down in the comments. Also, if you think this stuff is interesting, tap that like button. That feeds the algorithm so other people will follow it, and maybe we'll get some more discussion going on this. I know when people say, Bill, at your age, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z, they're saying it out of concern and love for me, and so I don't hold that against them. I also recognize that we're all on different paths. Some of us had to stop climbing trees long before others. And there's others of you that are blessed to be able to keep climbing trees long after I have to stop. That's okay. For me, I'm going to keep doing what I can do, partly because all evidence says that physical activity is good for us and slows down the aging process, but also, and perhaps more importantly, it makes my life more enjoyable. So I'm going to keep doing something fun. I hope you have something fun to do, and we'll talk again soon. Have a great day now. Bye.
I know that it can be there someday.